Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that many American lives have been lost.
The Japs copied their German masters in striking hard at airfields. Hickam Field, northwest of Honolulu, and the Ford Island Naval Plane Base were the first objectives of Japan's treachery. Scores of planes were bruised and battered by the Japs' aerial bombs. Many of these were demolished beyond repair. Direct hits were scored on hangars, and these were badly shattered. Equipment and airplane supplies were reduced to smoldering ruins. Here at the Naval Air Station is grim and positive evidence of Jap treachery. Here foul blows were struck, while Jap diplomats were talking peace in Washington.
The following list of men were born or lived most of their lives in West Virginia and died on December 7, 1941 at Hickam Field at Pearl Harbor. Gary Kenneth Stockwell was born in 1920 at Ivydale in Clay County. He enlisted in the Army Air Corps in September 1940 and was assigned to the 42nd Bomb Squadron of the 11th Bomb Group stationed at Hickam Field. Stockwell is buried in his hometown of Ivydale. Harold Carl Illiard was born at Parsons in Tucker County in 1913. In 1935, he married his wife Thelma, and they had one son. Harold enlisted in the military and was stationed at Hickam Field as a staff sergeant with the Army Air Corps' 17th Air Base Squadron, 18th Air Base Group. He is buried in the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Hawaii. Robert Maxwell Ritchie was born at Wellsburg in Brooke County in 1909. He attended West Virginia University, was an accountant before the war before enlisting in the Army Air Corps. Ricky, a pilot, was a first lieutenant with the 11th Bombardment Group stationed at Hickam Field. He is buried at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Hawaii. Thomas Monroe Wright was born at Weston in Lewis County in 1920. In July 1941, Thomas enlisted in the Army Air Corps. He was a private with the 18th Air Base Squadron, 17th Air Base Group stationed at Hickam Field. He is buried at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Hawaii.
First to feel the sting of Japanese steel are the USS Oklahoma and Utah, the latter a 33-year-old target ship. Accurate hits by the enemy bombers make short work of these two naval bulwarks. Now, with their keels practically out of water, they lie helpless wrecks and a sad reminder of cowardly strategy.
The following men were killed while on board the Oklahoma on December 7, 1941. Joseph William Carroll was born at Fairmont in Marion County in 1921. Joseph enlisted in the Navy in November 1941 and was a fireman second class on the Oklahoma. His name is memorialized on the tablets of the missing at Honolulu, Hawaii. In 2019, a U.S. Defense Agency announced that his remains had been identified and accounted for. Stanislaw Frank Dror was born at Thomas in Tucker County in 1916, a son of Polish immigrants. He enlisted in the Navy and was a pattern maker first class on the Oklahoma, repairing damaged parts and equipment. Stanislaw's name is memorialized on the tablets of the missing in Hawaii, and his remains were interred with other unidentified sailors at two cemeteries in Hawaii. In 2021, after DNA analysis, Stanislaw's remains were positively identified. After disinterment, he was buried in his hometown of Thomas. Sadly, in 1942, Stanislaw's brother Walter died when his ship sank in the North Atlantic during the war. Donald Robert McLeod was born in 1920 at Dingus in Mingo County. He enlisted in the Navy in 1937 and rose to the rank of Petty Officer Second Class as a fire control man on the Oklahoma. His name is memorialized at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific and on the Oklahoma Memorial. In 2019, a defense agency confirmed that his remains were identified and accounted for.
Low tide, the huge propeller of the Oklahoma, stilled by the enemy, was high above water. It is believed that the small two-man Jap submarines carrying dual torpedo tubes were responsible for these two losses to our Pacific Fleet.
Carl Nichols was born in Mingo County in 1921. Carl enlisted in the Navy in July 1940, and he was a seaman second class aboard the Oklahoma. His name is memorialized on the tablets of the missing in Hawaii, and his remains were interred along with other unidentified sailors. In 2018, a defense agency confirmed that Carl's remains were identified. After disinterment, he was buried near his family in Virginia. Eugene Mitchell Skaggs was born at Ansted in Fayette County. He married his wife Mary, and they had one daughter. Gene enlisted in the Navy in 1935 and was a signalman first class on the Oklahoma. His remains were buried at the National Cemetery of the Pacific in Hawaii, along with other unidentified sailors. In 2021, after his remains were positively identified, Gene's remains were disinterred and buried near his family in California. Bernard Raymond Wimmer was born in 1912 at Princeton in Mercer County. He enlisted in the Navy in 1937 and rose to the rank of fire controlman first class aboard the Oklahoma. His name is memorialized at the National Cemetery of the Pacific. Bernard's remains were positively identified in 2021, and he was buried near his hometown in Princeton. Charles Ray Casto was born in Pennsylvania in 1921, and his brother Richard Eugene Casto was born in Ohio in 1922. During the 1930s, they resided at Chester in Hancock County, West Virginia. The brothers both enlisted in the Navy prior to World War II, and both served on the Oklahoma when it was bombed on December 7, 1941. Charles served as a fireman first class. His remains were identified in 2017. Richard served as a fireman second class. Richard's remains have yet to be identified. One West Virginia sailor was killed aboard the battleship Utah. Frank Edward Reed, Jr. was born in Logan County in 1917. Frank enlisted in the Navy in November 1939 and served as a shipfitter third class, performing metal repairs on the Utah at Pearl Harbor when it was bombed on December 7, 1941. Frank's name is memorialized on the tablets of the missing in Honolulu, Hawaii. This is the end of part one of our tribute to West Virginians who died at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Subscribe to be notified when part two is published.